In the autumn of 1958, a woman named Dorothy Kessler walked into the Woolworths on South Main Street in Akron, Ohio, and spent $1.15. She did not buy dinner. She did not buy dessert. She bought a card of hairpins, a spool of white thread, and a tin of shoe polish. 3 items with nothing to do with the supper table. What she didn't know was that the same 15-cent tin of shoe polish would still be sitting, unopened, in her granddaughter's junk drawer 50 years later. Dorothy was not unusual. She was one woman inside a whole system, a quiet national inventory of habits passed counter to counter, town to town. This was a generation that had buried its savings in the Great Depression, rationed its sugar and rubber through the Second World War, and watched its topsoil blow away in the Dust Bowl. What they bought at the 5 and dime was never random. It was armor. Somewhere between the shopping mall and the shopping cart app, we lost the inventory. We traded the mending basket for the return policy and the tin of polish for a landfill. We did not run out of money. We ran out of the habit of not needing it. At number 22, a 5-cent item that outlasted 3 appliances. At number 14, a purchase tied to a 1958 government estimate that most households still can't beat. At number 1, the single habit so simple it will feel like an insult until you check your bank balance. These habits were never about frugality. They were about control. Subscribe. Let us count down the 30 things every American woman bought at Woolworths in 1958 that had nothing to do with food. Number 30. A card of safety pins. In Providence, Rhode Island, in 1958, a seamstress named Ruth Alderman kept a card of safety pins in every coat pocket she owned. They cost a nickel a dozen. A 1958 Bureau of Labor Statistics household survey listed pins among the top 10 most repurchased items in American homes, used for everything from hemming to holding a diaper in place. Ruth's daughter still finds them, decades later, in coat linings nobody remembers sewing. A pin holds more than fabric. Number 29. Mothballs. In Topeka, Kansas, Helen Voss packed her winter coats in cedar chests lined with mothballs every spring, a ritual her mother had taught her during the Depression, when a single coat had to survive a decade. A box cost 8 cents and protected garments worth 20 times that. The Department of Agriculture's 1958 Textile Bulletin noted moth damage as one of the leading causes of clothing loss in American households. She never replaced a coat. She only ever protected one. Number 28. Clothespins. In a backyard in Dayton, Ohio, Margaret Fillmore hung her wash on a line strung between 2 maples, using a bag of wooden clothespins that cost a dime and lasted a decade. Electric dryers were creeping into showrooms by 1958, priced near $200, nearly a month's wages. Margaret's line-dried sheets cost her nothing but sunlight. The wind did the work the machine would later charge for. Number 27. Hair curlers. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Loretta Pruitt bought a dozen bristle curlers for 30 cents and set her hair every Sunday night for church. A trip to the beauty parlor for the same result ran closer to $1.50. Beauty trade journals of the era estimated home sets saved the average woman upward of $60 a year. She never once paid to look like herself. Number 26. Shoelaces. In a row house in Baltimore, Frank and Irene Delgado kept a tin of spare shoelaces by the door for 4 growing children. A pair cost a nickel. A new pair of shoes ran close to $4. One broken lace never once became a new purchase. Irene's tin outlived every shoe it ever touched. Number 25. Handkerchiefs. In Charleston, South Carolina, Constance Reyes carried a fresh handkerchief pressed and folded into her purse every single morning, bought 3 for a quarter, and laundered 1,000 times over. Paper tissues existed by 1958, but were still considered a wasteful indulgence in many households, with cloth reuse the cultural default. She never threw away a cold. Number 24. Rubber bands. In Newark, New Jersey, Sylvia Katz saved every rubber band that arrived on a newspaper or a bunch of celery, looping them onto a doorknob until the ball grew as big as a fist. She never bought a package in her life. A habit costs nothing when the world keeps handing it to you for free. Not every Woolworth's habit stayed a habit. In 1958, a young mother in Muncie, Indiana, named Evelyn Marsh, bought a 25-cent sewing pattern and a yard of cotton print to make her daughter a school dress, the same as 10,000 other women that week. But Evelyn kept every pattern she ever used, tracing alterations in pencil in the margins, sizing up as her daughter grew. By 1974, she had 90 patterns in a cedar box. By 1991, her granddaughter, a costume design student, found the box in an attic and used it as the foundation of a thesis project on post-war domestic labor. That thesis became a small museum exhibit in Indianapolis in 2003. A 25-cent pattern, kept instead of discarded, became a documented piece of American textile history. Nobody in 1958 thought they were archiving anything. They just didn't believe in throwing things away. Sometimes the habit outlives the reason for it and becomes something else entirely: a record, an inheritance, a footnote in a museum case that started in a 5 and dime. Number 23. Buttons on a card. In Richmond, Virginia, Alma Whitfield kept a cigar box of buttons clipped from worn-out shirts before the fabric went into the rag bin, adding to the 2-cent card she still bought fresh at Woolworth's. A new shirt cost close to $3. A lost button never did. Nothing left her house with a button still attached to it. Number 22. Shoe polish. Back to Dorothy Kessler in Akron. Her 15-cent tin of polish, applied weekly, kept a single pair of Oxfords presentable for 4 years, while a new pair ran $4 or more. It outlasted 3 pairs of house slippers and 1 broken radio. Some things are built to bury their replacements. Number 21. Wrapping paper and ribbon. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, Bernice Yoakum bought a roll of wrapping paper each December and reused it, folded flat, for 3 Christmases running, alongside ribbon she pressed with a warm iron and wound back onto its spool. A fresh roll ran 15 cents. Hers cost 15 cents every 3 years. Nothing about the gift was smaller for it. Number 20. Playing cards. In a farmhouse outside Lincoln, Nebraska, the Hollis family bought 1 deck of playing cards for $1 in 1958, and it lasted them 11 winters of evening rummy, held together eventually with tape. Television sets cost near $300 that same year. $1 bought them a decade of evenings, no electricity required. Number 19. Talcum powder. In Savannah, Georgia, Odessa Gray kept a tin of talcum powder in every drawer in the house, a dime's worth doing the work of odor control long before commercial deodorant dominated shelves. It cooled a summer without electricity, a comfort nobody itemized. Some relief never needed a receipt. Number 18. Marbles and jacks. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Nowak children played the same bag of marbles, bought for a nickel in 1958, well into the 1970s, passed from an older brother to a younger cousin. No batteries, no screen, no obsolescence. A nickel bought a childhood, not a season. Number 17. Sewing needles. In Flint, Michigan, Dolores Whitcomb kept a paper packet of needles that cost 3 cents and mended school pants for 3 sons across 6 years. A new pair of trousers cost $1.50. She patched more than she ever purchased. There is one Woolworth's purchase, though, that became something the researchers themselves didn't expect. In 1958, a widow in Selma, Alabama, named Josephine Carter, bought a spool of heavy-duty thread and a pack of quilting needles for 18 cents, intending to piece together scraps from her children's outgrown clothing into a single blanket. She finished it in 1961. She started another the following winter, and another after that, teaching the pattern to her daughter, who taught it to hers. By 2015, 5 generations of Carter women had made 41 quilts from that original 18-cent purchase, one of which was donated to a folk art collection in Montgomery and photographed for a state historical archive. A single spool of thread, bought to save money on a blanket, became a family's visual record of 6 decades. Nobody in that Woolworth's checkout line in 1958 could have told you that. They only knew that a scrap of fabric was worth more sewn onto something than thrown away. Number 16. Knitting yarn. In Bangor, Maine, Winifred Doucette bought a skein of wool yarn for 20 cents each week through the winter of 1958 and knitted mittens for every child on her street, at a fraction of the 75 cents a store-bought pair cost. She never once let a hand go cold on her own dime. Number 15. Light bulbs. In Omaha, Nebraska, Harold and June Petrocelli bought 60-watt bulbs for a dime apiece and shut lights off behind them in every room without exception, a habit June's mother had drilled into her during Depression-era electric bills that could run a family into debt. A single unused bulb saved nothing. A house full of them, over a year, saved real money. Discipline, not deprivation, kept the lights low. Number 14. Wallpaper remnants. In Wichita, Kansas, Pearl Adamski bought discounted wallpaper remnant rolls for a dime and papered one wall a year instead of a whole house at once, spreading a $2 renovation across 5 seasons. A 1958 Department of Commerce housing report noted remnant sales as a common budgeting strategy among lower-income homeowners. She never once took out a loan for a room. Number 13. House paint, pint cans. In Butte, Montana, Walter Sikorsky bought pint cans of paint for 35 cents to touch up trim rather than repaint an entire porch, stretching 1 gallon's worth of color across 3 years of small repairs. A full repaint ran near $6. He never let small damage become a big bill. Number 12. Bath soap. In Little Rock, Arkansas, Nadine Ellis bought bar soap for a nickel and cut each bar in half before it ever touched water, doubling its life without anyone in the house noticing a difference. A nickel a month covered what other households spent a dime on. The difference sat, uncomplaining, in a soap dish for years. Number 11. Hair nets. In Trenton, New Jersey, Agnes Kowalczyk bought a card of hairnets for a dime and wore one to bed every night to preserve a set that cost her $1.50 at the parlor. The habit stretched one salon visit across 3 weeks instead of 1. She slept in the effort so she wouldn't have to pay for it twice. Number 10. Comic books. In San Antonio, Texas, the Reyes children pooled their nickels to buy a single comic book and traded it door to door down the block for weeks, so that 1 dime's worth of paper entertained a dozen households before it fell apart. Nobody called it a lending library. It was one anyway. Number 9. Costume jewelry. In Louisville, Kentucky, Thelma Osgood bought a single strand of glass pearls for 35 cents and wore them to every wedding, funeral, and church supper for 11 straight years, because a genuine strand ran past $20, a month's rent for some families. Nobody at the funeral asked if the pearls were real. She never told them. Number 8. Paper dolls. In Des Moines, Iowa, Carol Fenwick bought a paper doll book for a dime, and her daughters played with the same cutouts, patched with tape, for 4 birthdays running. A doll with a wardrobe of actual fabric cost closer to $2. Paper held a childhood together as well as anything did. Number 7. A handled basket for mending. In Spokane, Washington, Genevieve Holt bought a wicker mending basket for 50 cents in 1958, and it sat by every chair she ever owned for the next 31 years, holding thread, pins, and buttons in one place, so nothing worth fixing ever got lost long enough to be thrown out. A basket bought once outlived 4 sofas. Number 6. Thimbles. In Portland, Oregon, Ida Brannigan bought a metal thimble for a nickel and wore a groove into it, hemming curtains, cuffs, and hand-me-downs for 2 decades without a single pricked finger slowing her down. A National Home Economics Council pamphlet from the period listed the thimble as standard equipment in 90% of American households. A nickel protected a whole decade of hands. Number 5. Batteries for the flashlight. In Duluth, Minnesota, Roy Halverson bought a pair of batteries for 15 cents each fall and kept one flashlight working through every power outage a Minnesota winter could produce, rather than replacing the flashlight itself when it dimmed. A new flashlight cost $1. He never once blamed the tool for a battery's fault. Number 4. Cleaning rags cut from old sheets. Back in Akron again, a coincidence Dorothy Kessler would have appreciated. A neighbor named Vera Lindquist cut worn-out bed sheets into a stack of cleaning rags rather than buying a single commercial rag at the store, at a savings of roughly 40 cents a month. A 1958 home economics textbook listed rag cutting as a first lesson for young homemakers. Nothing in her house died twice. It just changed jobs. Number 3. Postage stamps bought in sheets. In Cheyenne, Wyoming, Opal Denby bought a full sheet of 3-cent stamps rather than a handful at a time, so she was never caught without one and never made a special trip just to mail a letter, a habit that saved her, by her own ledger, an estimated $2 a year in gas and time. A stamp bought in advance was a trip never taken. Number 2. A coin purse used daily. In Fresno, California, Mabel Truitt bought a 10-cent coin purse in 1958 and used it to separate grocery money from rent money before either one ever touched her hand, a private budgeting system that cost a dime and outperformed banks that wouldn't extend her family credit. Nothing fancy ever balanced a budget better than knowing, by touch, exactly what was left. And so we arrive at the simplest one. Number 1. A notebook, 5 cents. In Sioux Falls, South Dakota, in the spring of 1958, a woman named Ruth Ann Callahan bought a 5-cent notebook at the Woolworths on Phillips Avenue and wrote down every single thing she spent for the rest of her life. Not a budgeting app, not a spreadsheet, a 5-cent notebook and a pencil kept in the same kitchen drawer for 40 years until her daughter found 41 of them stacked and dated after Ruth Ann passed in 1998. That is the final answer. Not the pins, not the polish, not the thread. The habit of writing it down. It is almost insulting in its simplicity, the kind of answer that makes you want a more complicated one, something with a trick to it. There is no trick. The generation that survived the Depression, rationed through a war, and watched their farmland blow away in a decade of dust did not out-earn their hardship. They out-tracked it. They knew to the penny where every nickel from that Woolworth's counter had gone, because not knowing was the one thing they could no longer afford. We have not lost the money to do what they did. We have lost the notebook. We have replaced it with convenience that doesn't ask us to look, auto-pay that doesn't ask us to notice, and carts that fill themselves before we've counted the cost. Ruth Ann Callahan never earned more than her neighbors. She simply never let a nickel pass through her hands unrecorded in a 5-cent notebook that outlasted every dollar it ever tracked. Write it down. That's the whole inheritance.